Hello and welcome back at the FinetLink channel, where today we will configure IPv4 and IPv6 static and default routes. In this activity, the objectives are for us to configure static, default, and floating static routes for both IPv4 and IPv6 protocol. We will configure IPv4 and IPv6 default static and floating static routes, and the static route approaching that is used here in this packet tracer is used to assess your ability to configure different types of static routes only, and this approach may not reflect network best practice. And as you can see, in our network, we have the edge router, Internet Service Provider 1, Internet Service Provider 2, and a customer server. And we want for our LAN network 1 and LAN network 2 to communicate with the customer server, and as the primary route will go through Internet Service Provider 1, and the route through Internet Service Provider 2 will be as a backup route to reach the customer server in case that the primary route through the Internet Service Provider 1 fails. And this is our addressing table where we will refer for our network configuration. And here are all the steps that we will go through for configuring our network. The first thing that we need to do is to configure an IPv4 static and floating static default route. Here in the packet tracer network, we see that the network requires static route to provide internet access to the internal LAN users through the internet service providers, as we mentioned. And in addition, the internet service provider routes require static routes to reach the internal LAN network. And in this part of the activity, we will configure an IPv4 static default route and a floating default route to add redundancy to the network. And the reason why we use a floating default route or a floating route in our network, as we mentioned, is to add redundancy, and the floating route will be used as the backup route to communicate in case of the primary route will fail. So the first step is to configure an IPv4 static default route, which means that we will go to the edge router and we will configure a directly connected IPv4 default static route. And this will be the primary default route and should go through the Internet Service Provider 1. And the purpose of using a default static route as manually configured is for using her as a gateway of the last resource that will tell the router where to send the packets where there is no specific route existing in the routing table for the destination. So first, let's access the router. We go to the global configuration mode, and from here we will start configure. The syntax for configuring a default static route is like IP route, the command, and it will be followed with the network command and the subnet mask. And since we are the default, the network and the subnet mask will be all bits as 0. And then we will set we will add the next hop, where the next hop will be the IP of the internet service provider in the gateway in the interface that is connected with Edge router. To show you the interface, um, we click at the allow show port labels in the logical workspace and see it is serial 000, which means that we go here and the IP for this interface is this one. So it will be 10.10.10.1. The next step is to configure an IPv4 floating static default route. When you configure a static route, it is by default with the administrative distance as 1. And the router will choose as the primary route to send the traffic the route with the smallest administrative distance. And since we want that our floating route to be as the backup route, we will add an administrative distance higher than 1. And here in this packet tracer, it is required that the administrative distance to be as 5. And the floating route now will send the traffic through the internet service provider too, which means that we will go with IP route command, follow with the default network and the subnet mask as all zeros. And in this case, now, since we will go through the internet service provider too, will be the interface that is connected with the IP. As the next hop will be the IP address of the internet interface that is connected with our edge router and the internet service provider too. And that interface is serial 001 with this IP address. So we go in our router and then and at the end of the command we will add the administrative distance, which is 5. And this is the configuration for the IPv4 network. Now we will go and configure the IPv6 static and floating static routes. So we will, to configure the IPv6 route, we go with the command IPv6 route, and then the syntax is so here the same as in the IPv4, all the bits on the IPv6 and the prefix length will be as 0. And then we will show the next hop, which means that we will add the address of the interface that is connected with the edge router in the internet service provider one. So will be this one. Let's see if we can copy that. Both 2301 DB8 A1 1. And now even for the IPv6 network, we will configure the floating static route, which have the same function, which will go with the same command. And now the IP will be this one as the next hop. And here again, we will add the administrative instance. So now we configure the floating, the static and the floating static default routes for both IPv4 and IPv6 network in the edge router. What we will do now is configure IPv4 static and floating static routes to the internal LAN network. In this part of the lab, here we will configure static and floating static routes from the Internet Service Provider router to the internal LAN, and we will go and configure IPv4 static routes to the internet LAN and in the internet service provider one. So we go to the internet service provider one. We log in. Global configuration mode, and from here we will configure a next hop IPv4 static route to the LAN network one through the edge router. So by using IP route, the command for the static route, we will reach the LAN network one, which has the IP address as 192.168.10.16 with the subnet mask as /28, which is 255.255.255.240. And this it says with the next hop, which means that we will add the IP address of the next hop, and in this case is the IP address of the serial 00 interface of the edge router, which is the interface that is connected with our internet service provider. So we go here, and the edge router, it was serial 00 IP address. So we were here, and it is 10.10.10.2. Now we will configure a next hop IPv4 static route to reach the LAN network 2 through the edge router, which means that we will use the same command. And as I said, we will try to reach LAN network 2, which has the IP address as 192.168.11.32. So we change to, and the subnet mask here is /27, which means it will be 255.255.255.224, and the IP of the next hop is the same because I will communicate through the edge router. Now we will configure IPv4 floating static routes to reach the internal LAN network. And here in this case, we will use an administrative distance as 5, and we will do a directly connected floating static route, which means that when we say a directly connected, we will use the exit interface to reach the destination network. So by using the IP route command, we say that we will reach this network, the first LAN, Since it is a floating route, it will go through the internet service provider, which means the exit interface will be giga 00. So giga 0/0, and the administrative distance will be S5. Same for reaching the network 11 or 32 network 2. With a subnet mask /27, which is 4, through the same interface as an exit interface with administrative distance as 5. Now that we are configured in for the IPv4 network, we will go and configure the IPv6 network, the static routes to reach the internet LAN network. We use the IPv6 route. We are configuring the IPv6 static route. And we will say to reach the DB8 1 10, which has a /64 is the IPv6 of the LAN network 1. And here we will configure our next hop IPv6 static route, which means that we will use the IP of the next hop, and in this case, the IP of the next hop will be the IP of the serial 000 of the edge router. So we go here, and it will be 001 DB8 A1 2. We will try to reach even the LAN 2 network. So we will go as IPv6 route, follow with the IP6 address of the LAN 2 network. The same exit interface. And now that we are done configuring the static IPv6 route, we will go and configure the floating static route for the IPv6 network, which will go with the IPv6 route. We will try to reach the LAN network 1, but now in this case, we will reach it through the internet service provider 2, which means that the next hop IP address will be the IP address of the internet service provider at the giga 00 interface, which is the interface that is connected with our internet service provider 1. So will be this IP address. So we were here, and it we will add the administrative distance as 5. Now we will try to reach the network LAN 2. And with this, we configured even the 6 static and floating static routes to reach the internal LAN networks. The last part is to configure the host routes. Users on the corporate network frequently access a server that is owned by an important customer. And in this part of the activity, we will configure static host routes to the server. One route will be a floating static route to support the redundant internet service provider connection. The reason why we use configure a host route is that we want to direct the traffic to reach a host through a particular route. And in this case, we will go and configure on the edge router an IPv4 directly connected host route to the customer server, which means that we'll go here. And since it's asking us to configure an IPv4 directly connected host route to the customer server, we will say that we configure our IP route to reach the server, which is 198.0.0.10 with the subnet mask as, sorry, 255 uh, 255 255. And when we say that, when we want the all bytes, all bits at the subnet mask as 1, we want that the route to match the IP address of the server. And it will be through the internet serial 000. 000. Sorry, we want to run the global configuration mode, so we go IP route again. We reach the server 198.0.0.10. We use all bits of the subnet mask as 0, which means that all the bits of the IP address to match the server through the internet 0/0/0. And again, on the edge router, we'll configure an IPv4 directly connected floating host route to the customer server, and we will use the advanced distance as 5. So again, but in this case, since we are using the floating route, it will reach the customer server through the internet service provider, and the exit interface will be the interface serial 001. And it will have an administrative distance as 5. We will do the same to configure a host route for the IPv6 network. So IPv6 route, and it will be the IPv6 of the of the server. Okay, let's go this way so we can see the IP of the server. Yes. IP route, it is 8 Since it's directly so next here we will configure our next hop, which will be address IP address of serial 000, which was 200 8 A1 2 1 prefix line. Mm, prefix line will be 128. I will see yourself. I was using the wrong IP address, IPv6 address here. And we will configure even the floating. With the administrative distance as 5. Now that we have configured our network, let's go and show IP route. As you can see, we have our directly connected network and the static route that we have configured in the router one, and the edge router, sorry. We have the static route, and which is the host route, and we have the default static route. Let's show even for the IPv6. Show IPv6 route. We have the static route that is configured, the default static route, and the host static route that is configured. Let's go to the serial to the internet service provider and let's see show IP route. We have two static routes for the LAN network 1 and the LAN network 2. Show IPv6 route, and we have for even this IPv6 network the two static routes that we have configured. But as you can see, there are in our routing table are shown only the static routes that we have configured and default static route, not the floating route, because in the routing table, it is as added the route that is active at the moment that the network is working. So let's see if PCA communicate with the server. So go ping. Let's go ping the 198.0.0. Sorry, .0.10. For the PCP, let's try to ping the server, but in this time to ping the IPv6. F10 So it is able to communicate. But well, let's do this. We go to the PCA and this will assert on 98.0, and it will show us the route that go from our PCA to reach the customer server. And as you can see, it go to the Giga00 interface of the edge router. From here, it will go to the serial 000 of the internet service provider, and then it will reach the customer server. Let's go here and use the tracer command and let's see what is the route, which means that it will go through the Giga001 of the edge router, will go at the serial 001 of internet service provider, and then will reach the customer server. So let's do this. Let's go to our serial 00 and let's go to config terminal. And here, let's go to the interface serial 000 and let's do that shut down. So shut down. And if we change state administratively as down, we can see here that the link now is not working. Let's do this. Let the and let's use show IP route. And as you can see, the static route change. It says that we can reach the server through the Giga Ethernet 00. And if we go up where we had it before, okay, let's go. See, it shows that you can reach this way. And now it's showing that we can reach through the internet service provider. So you can see that the table, the routing table is updated. Let's go to the edge router. Let's use show IP route. And as you can see, it changed even here. So let's go to the PCA. Let's use the command tracert. So again, you can see that this route is different from this one because now it goes through the internet service provider too. Same for the IPv6 network. You can see the difference. So let's go here. Config terminal. I show you only for the changes for the IPv4 network, but the same will be even for the IPv6 network. Anyway, let's go to the interface serial 0/0/0, and let's do it no shut down. Change that to up, as you can see, and let's say show Choose show IP route. And as you can see, the route changed. And it's the same route that we had before. Because as we said, in the routing table, will be listed the route that is active. In this case, both routes are active, floating and the primary route. But in the routing table will be added the route that has the lowest administrative distance, and the static route that we configured is with the administrative distance as 1 and is the primary route to send the traffic through. So let's, if you go here, we'll see the same change. Those changes will be even for the IPv6 network. See, and let's go to the PCA, and once again, let's do the trust cert, and which means that we are going through the primary route that we used before. Same for the PCB. So this it was all about the configuring an IPv4 and IPv6 static and default route. And we did at the end even some troubleshooting so you could understand better the static route and floating static route, even static route, default static route, and the floating static default route, and the purpose of the configuring a host route. So thank you for being with us. See you to the next videos. And if you like this material, share it with your friends. And if you are new to this channel, do not forget to subscribe, and see you later.